There are some doors you should never open and some things that should never be seen. When Jake moved into his new home, he was given one simple rule: never look under the basement door. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and once you break the rules, there's no turning back. Scratching in the night, whispers calling his name, and something, though, waiting in the darkness. Tonight, on Haunted Horizons, we bring you a story that will haunt you long after the screen goes dark. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't look under the door. The warning. When Jake Carter moved into the old rental house on Oak Ridge Lane, he thought he'd found a steal. It was cheap, fully furnished, and tucked away in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The landlord, a frail old man with shaking hands, handed him the key with an odd hesitation. "There's one rule," he muttered. "Don't look under the basement door." Jake let out a half laugh, waiting for the punchline. When none came, he shrugged. "All right, deal." The landlord's grip tightened on the key. "I mean it. No matter what you hear, no matter what it says, don't look." That was the only warning Jake received before the man hurried out, leaving him standing alone in his new home. The sounds begin. For the first few nights, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The house creaked in the wind, the pipes rattled now and then, but nothing unusual. Then, on the fourth night, it began. A faint scratching sound from the basement. Jake stirred in his sleep, half awake, before convincing himself it was just the house settling. But the next night, the scratching grew louder, more insistent. By the fifth night, it wasn't just scratching, it was breathing. A slow, raspy inhalation, followed by a shuddering exhale. The sound of someone, or something, just behind that door. Jake lay in bed, gripping the sheets, his pulse hammering in his ears. "It's just in your head," he told himself. "Old houses make weird noises." But deep down, a part of him wasn't so sure. The whisper. By the end of the first week, Jake had developed a new habit: checking the basement door. Every morning, he'd glance at it before making his coffee, ensuring it was still locked. Every night, he'd hesitate in the hallway, staring at it longer than he should. On the ninth night, something changed. As he turned off the hallway light, just before heading to bed, a voice, soft and pleading, drifted from beneath the door. "Jake!" His entire body froze. He swallowed hard, stepping backward. "It's just your imagination." "Jake!" The whisper came again, a sickly sweetness laced into it. "It's so cold down here. Please, just a peek." Every hair on Jake's body stood on end. He bolted to his room, locking the door, the voice still echoing in his skull. Curiosity is a curse. Jake tried to ignore it. He truly did. But the whispers continued. Every night, the voice grew more insistent, more desperate. It begged. It wept. It laughed. By the 12th night, exhaustion had taken its toll. He had to know. Just a quick glance, just a second. Armed with his phone flashlight, Jake crept down the hallway, heart slamming against his ribs. The basement door loomed in the darkness, the warning from the landlord pounding in his head. But the voice tonight, it wasn't pleading. It was mocking. "Oh, Jake, I knew you'd come." His breath hitched. His fingers trembled as he knelt, slowly lowering his head to the cold wooden floor. Just one peek, he tilted his head sideways and looked under the door. What he saw. At first, there was nothing, just darkness. Then, a set of fingers, long, spindly, and too many joints slid forward from the void. Jake's breath stopped in his throat. The fingers curled, tapping against the floor in a rhythmic pattern. Tap, tap, tap. Then came the eyes. Two enormous, unblinking black pits stared back at him. They weren't human. They weren't right. They were too wide, too deep. They saw him. And worst of all, they smiled. A set of teeth. Jagged, yellowed, too many rows. Spreading into an impossibly wide grin beneath those hollow, soulless eyes. Jake scrambled backward, crashing into the wall. His phone hit the floor with a dull thud. He scrambled to grab it, his vision swimming, as the voice cooed from beneath the door. "Oh, Jake, now you've done it." A loud thud rattled the door, then another and another. Something was slamming against it. Jake bolted upright, sprinting down the hallway, diving into his room and locking the door behind him. He pressed his back against it, panting, heart trying to burst out of his chest. Silence. Then, the voice. It was right outside his bedroom door now. "Jake, why did you look?" Part 2. The door opens. Jake didn't sleep. He didn't move. He just sat there, pressing against the door, waiting. Then, just before dawn, a soft click echoed through the house. The basement door had unlocked. His breath hitched as he heard slow, deliberate footsteps coming down the hallway. They stopped just outside his room. Silence. Then, the handle to his bedroom door turned. Jake squeezed his eyes shut, gripping the nearest object, his phone. He wanted to scream, to move, to do anything, but his body refused, frozen in fear. The handle stopped. Then, a whisper. But this time, it wasn't behind the door. It was inside the room. "Jake, you let me in." The air turned ice cold. The floor creaked behind him. Then, a hand, thin and clammy, rested on his shoulder. Part 3. The keeper of the door. Jake's scream died in his throat as the fingers tightened, pressing into his skin like ice-cold iron. He turned his head slowly, breath shallow, and saw it. A towering figure, too tall, too thin, its skin stretched tight over its bones. The face was wrong. Too many eyes, too many mouths, all grinning. Jake tried to run, but the thing's grip held firm. "Shh," it whispered, its voices overlapping, echoing. "You looked, Jake. Now, you belong here." The walls twisted. The air grew thick. The bedroom door was gone. Jake screamed as the darkness swallowed him whole. But he didn't die. Instead, he woke up. He was lying on the basement floor. The door was open, swinging slightly, revealing an endless void beyond. A whisper curled around him. "It's your turn now, Jake." And behind him, something else began to stir. A new voice, a new whisper, another tenant, another warning left unheeded. And so, the cycle began again. Part 4. The Final Keeper. Jake's world had changed. He no longer lived in a house. He lived in a nightmare. The whispering never stopped. The scratching grew worse. The thing beneath the door was no longer satisfied with waiting. It wanted out. He tried leaving. The front door, locked. The windows, unbreakable. His phone had no signal. Every escape he attempted led him right back to the basement door. Then, on the 13th night, everything went silent. The house was too quiet. Jake stood in the hallway, staring at the basement door. The knob slowly turned. A voice, impossibly close, whispered, "Come in, Jake." The door creaked open. Darkness stretched beyond the threshold, deeper than the eye could perceive. Something moved within, shifting, twisting, waiting. Jake took a step forward. A cold wind pulled him in. The house was empty the next day. The landlord arrived, sighing, shaking his head as he replaced the lock. Another tenant gone. The house remained. The door remained. And in the darkness beneath it, a voice whispered, "Don't look."